Hey world, it's your girl Nina Love. Thanks for being here. We at this again. Today I just wanted to talk about some of the things that influenced me to love reading and writing so much. I went to Hau'ula Elementary on Oahu in the state of Hawaii. And most of my love of reading and writing came when I was young, because by the time I got to high school, I had already loved reading and writing. So in the third grade, I had a teacher, Mr. Ho. When Mr. Ho recognized that a student in his class, had advanced level reading, he would pull us out and he gave us, there was a few of us that were advanced level readers, and he gave us books every couple of weeks. He would give us a new book to read. And I remember one of the first books he gave me to read was The Boxcar Children. And in the third grade, you're what, 8? Yeah, you're 8. And the book was like this thick. So it was kind of like, whoa, I'm reading like big girls. Anyway, The Boxcar Children was like, wow, when you grow up in Hawaii, you have a set type of experiences that you will have just living on an island with the culture, Pacific Island culture. And so reading The Boxcar Children was like so far out of my realm of experience. So reading it was like stepping out into a different world. You had, it was like these 4 siblings that lived in the forest on their own. And I remember thinking, wow, they would take the butter, they would buy butter from the store, and they would keep it cool by putting it in the cold pond or cold river. It was just so outside of my realm of experience. So that was like discovery for me of loving to read, because it was taking me so far out of what I had known in my childhood. That was the third grade. Then the fourth grade, I had Miss Tepper. Miss Ellie Tepper. Anybody who went to Hau'ula Elementary know those 2 teachers, Mr. Ho and Miss Tepper. And I had Miss Tepper for language arts. Do they still call it language arts? Anyway, she used to have writing, like journal writing, after lunch. I think it was like after lunch. We would come in and we had a composition book. She would give us a topic. Sometimes she would give us a topic, and sometimes she would just let us free write. And I remember looking so forward to it, because we didn't do it every day. It was like once a week maybe. But I remember looking forward to that time of day or that time of the week to be able to just write. And I knew that I had a penchant for fiction when I was writing. I remember writing a story about my Auntie Malia and how all of us were at the hospital when she passed away. And I kind of embellished it. And I added way more emotion than was there. And I knew, I was like, oh, that didn't happen, but it sounds good. And also with Miss Tepper, every Friday, she would read a chapter from a book. And I believe every person that I've talked to that had Miss Tepper in the 4th grade knew exactly, like she did it every year. And so all of us have these shared experiences of this book reading she did on Friday afternoons. And it would be, I remember it was, one book was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. And the other book was The Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. And so those 2 books, coupled with Miss Tepper reading it to us, like we would all sit on the floor in front of her and she would read. And those books did not have pictures. So we all had to pay attention to her, and she would use these dramatic voices to bring the story to life. And that was another thing or influence for me that was like, wow, I love this. Like C.S. Lewis, everyone remembers him as a Christian author, but you would never know when you read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that it was, espousing Christian ideals. And so I credit those two things, those two teachers, for giving me the love of reading and the love of writing, especially Miss Tepper. And I don't know when she left Hau'ula Elementary, but what a sad day that must have been. Like, those kids that came up would never know the joy of reading and writing the way Miss Tepper did it. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and The Island of the Blue Dolphins. Those are excellent reads for 8 and 9-year-olds. And by the time I got to college, high school was like a wash. I didn't even, I don't recall making a big connection to any of the books we read. I remember in the 7th grade, we did a lot of Shakespeare. We read a lot of Shakespeare, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is torture to read Shakespeare. And in the 8th grade, we read The Lord of the Flies and The Diary of Anne Frank. Both of which stories I could not relate to. Probably if I read it now, it would be, would make a little more sense, and I would see all the symbolism and the human story behind it. But in the 8th grade, I was not feeling it. So yeah, by the time I hit high school, I wasn't interested in the types of things we were reading. And then when I got to college, I think it was English 250. I had Professor Peterson. I think his name was Professor Peterson. Anyway, he introduced me to this. This is my college copy of The Color Purple. This is actually, and it has all my notes in the margins, but it is old and beat up. Just look at how aged the edges are. All my life, I have been an avid writer, like letter writer. So when I read The Color Purple, most of it is letters, our letters to God, letters. It is so beautiful. So this changed or added more dimension to what I like to read so quickly. I realized also that there was very little literature for Pacific Islanders that was as moving as The Color Purple for me. After this, I became so hungry to read. Actually, probably after The Color Purple, no. Actually, in high school, I read Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And that had an effect on me also because of the experience again. Once again, I was stepping outside of my known experience. So reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, finding Maya Angelou was like, wow. She became my favorite author until I came upon this book. And I remember when I discovered Maya Angelou was actually from an episode of A Different World where Tisha Campbell was playing a student who had HIV, and she read And Still I Rise. She read the poem by Maya Angelou, And Still I Rise. I thought it was the most beautiful thing. The next time my parents took me to the mall, I went straight to Walden Books looking for anything by Maya Angelou, which is how I discovered I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And beautiful. I did a paper in English 111 in college on on a piece of I Know Why a Caged Bird Sings. And I don't think my professor, because I went to a predominantly white LDS college, and the professor was kind of like, what, you know? But I knew, I couldn't relate to any of the other things that any of the other books. So I chose my own book, like books that I had to do a review on or things that inspired me. But it was good. And then, so after The Color Purple, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, The Color Purple, I happened upon this book. Toni Morrison, Song of Solomon. This is still the first copy I ever had. Well, no, this is the second copy. I had to get rid of the first copy because it was damaged in a flood. So I found this at a probably, I think, Goodwill. So I love this book, and I think I've read it like 20 times. I also have the Kindle version, so whenever I feel needing inspiration, I just pull it out on my Kindle and read it. This, Toni Morrison, is also a favorite of mine. I know a lot of people don't like her work because it's kind of confusing and convoluted almost, but by the end of her books, you have this massive aha moment all the time, and she takes you through all of these strange emotions, especially this one. Oh, when I came to the end, I cried. Every time I come to the end, I know exactly what's going to happen at the end, and the words that she uses moves me every time I read this. So finally, as a grown woman in my mid-20s, hungry for literature that covered my life experience, I happened upon this book, Shark Dialogues by Kiana Davenport. This book changed me, and this shows and displays much of Hawaiian culture and Pacific Island culture, and it weaves it with the mythology and the practices of my ancestors with modern touches, and it's like a sweeping epic novel covering decades and decades of life in Hawaii. So you go from the creation, and then you go through the struggle of European contact, the dying of so many of my ancestors because of disease, and the turn of the century with the Americans taking over the kingdom and basically just stealing our land from us. And it brings it forward to the modern era, where you have people who love having been colonized, who are actually more comfortable being American than they are with our historical past. You have characters that do not like colonialism, and they want the colonizers to leave. You cover people who are not even interested in either, that are just struggling to live. Anyway, beautiful, beautiful story, and I just love it. And I've read all of her books. After I read this book, this is her first book that I ever read, and then I read all of her novels, but this is still my favorite. And most of her novels covers the different experiences of Hawaiian people with contact with the outer world. So much of Hawaiian history, or in Hawaii, there has been intermarrying. You know, like as the pure Hawaiians started to die off because of disease and just not being able to assimilate to American culture, you start to see intermarrying between foreigners. So Hawaiians and Japanese, Hawaiians and Filipinos, and Hawaiians and Portuguese and Americans. You know, like there is just so much intermarrying. So there was tons of Japanese, Filipino, Portuguese laborers that came to Hawaii to work the sugarcane fields. The Civil War required like this surge of sugar, because the South wasn't providing sugar to the North, and it was just an opportune time for the children of American missionaries to capitalize on the sugar industry that was totally covered by the South prior to the Civil War. And so they capitalized on it. American missionary children. And they eventually took over the kingdom of Hawaii. That's a totally different topic for another day. But so those are my influences. Mr. Ho in the 3rd grade, introducing me to reading, knowing that I was an advanced reader, and wanting me to continue my love for reading. Miss Tepper She made me love writing with our journaling that we did once a week, and her reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and The Island of the Blue Dolphins. Beautiful. And then my discovery of other books, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, and then Shark Dialogues by Kiana Davenport. And those are probably my biggest influences in wanting to write. In recent years, there are several Pacific Islander writers that have come forward and have written beautiful, beautiful narratives of the experience of Pacific Islanders. My favorite right now is Lani Went. She is the writer of the Telesa series. Oh, love it. I love to see my culture on display. And she has another book coming out in September, so I can't wait for that. I think it's September. Yeah. Beautiful writing. And once again, my culture on display, which I love. There is a Albert Wendt, which I believe Lani Went is related to, who also put out several books. Sia Figel. There are a bunch of writers from the Pacific Islands that have produced very good works that I wish I had when I was younger. And I wish that was available during my college years so that I could tear it apart the way I did this. So for parents of children that love to read, the best thing you can give them is more books to read. So go over there to the library, go research the kind of things that you want your children to learn through novels, and you can find a book on anything. Especially for Pacific Island children who love to read, what they're hungry for is to read books that are that show and display our experience in the islands. I hope to do that. My first novel is that I'm working on right now is actually displaying a coming of age of a young woman in Hawaii that is trying to merge the life that her mother gave her, which her mother is not a U.S. citizen, and she was not raised in America. So she's trying to merge her life that her mother gave her with her Pacific Island ideals with American colonialism. So it's similar to many experiences that all of us who are first generation Americans that we're hungry to read about, you know. So my mother never became a citizen of the United States of America, even though when she married my father, she never left. She just was not trying to be an American citizen. It's a funny story, actually. But so I consider myself a first generation American because my father was born before Hawaii was a state. So I never asked him how that happened. So if he was naturalized or whatever, or because he was born in a territory of the U.S., what did that make him? Was he a U.S. national? What is it? Anyway, I never asked him, but I do consider myself a first generation American. Would that be first generation American? Anyway, those are my influences. And like I said, for parents who want to give their budding readers, their children, something to read, I would suggest looking for things that are similar to your experience, as well as giving them something different, something that they might be interested in. Like, for instance, after this and this, I was all in it. I went and read authors that came about in the Harlem Renaissance, and I devoured it because I was so hungry for this, which is something that I experienced. So as I move forward and as I write, that is my focus, is to give the books that I wish I had when I was little. Anyway, thanks for coming along my journey. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram at Love Nina Love. It's your girl, Nina Love. Have a fabulous week. See you next week.